Stay with me tonight, Han Ji-won said, pulling Seo Yuna close beneath the gold light of the ballroom chandeliers. Imani Adeyemi set her silver tray down so carefully it did not make a sound. "She won't," she said. The music kept playing for one impossible second. Then the maid looked the most feared man in Seoul in the eyes and finished, "I will." But that was not how the story began. It began on a Thursday in October, with rain tapping the service entrance of the Mirang Crown Hotel and a final notice folded in half inside Imani Adeyemi's apron pocket. The hallway smelled like lemon polish and wet wool. The air conditioning was too cold, the marble floor too clean, and Imani's hands were dry from bleach no matter how much she rubbed shea butter into them before every shift. At 28, she had learned to look put together even when life was trying to drag her by the ankle. Her skin was deep brown and smooth except for the thin, pale scar at her chin, and her hair was tucked into a low, neat bun under the white headpiece of her maid uniform. She had 48 hours before her landlord changed the lock. She had 12 hours before Malik's tuition payment was due. And she had exactly one warning left before Director Choi Min-seok found a reason to fire her. "Imani!" The voice snapped across the corridor like a ruler striking a desk. She turned. Director Choi stood near the linen room in a charcoal suit, dry under the fluorescent light, while rainwater darkened the hem of everyone else's shoes. He smiled the way some men smiled when they had already decided your day belonged to them. "Presidential floor," he said, handing her a keycard and not quite touching her fingers. "Private request. No delays." She took the card. "I'm finishing 12:06 first." His smile thinned. "I gave an instruction. And I heard it." He watched her for a beat too long. Choi liked that. The tiny pauses. The reminders. Her work visa had come through the hotel's overseas hiring program, and men like him loved systems that let them confuse employment with ownership. From inside her pocket, her phone buzzed once. Malik. Probably asking if she had sent the payment. She did not check it. "Be quick," Choi said. "Important guest." He walked away, smelling faintly of expensive cologne and something colder underneath. Control. Men like him always smelled a little like control. Imani finished the room in 4 minutes flat, changed the sheets, reset the towels, and rolled her cart toward the private elevator. Rain rattled harder against the high windows. Somewhere below, in the lobby, a piano was playing something soft enough to disappear under the noise of money. The presidential floor was quiet in the unnatural way expensive places often were. No children running. No doors slamming. Just the hush of wealth and thick carpet swallowing every step. She rounded the corner near the service corridor and heard a grunt. Then the sharp smack of something hitting the wall. She stopped. Male voices. Low. Urgent. Another sound followed. A body stumbling. Then silence. Imani tightened her grip on the cart handle. This was not her business. That sentence had kept her employed in 3 cities and 2 countries. This was not her business. She repeated it once. Then a man came through the half-open service door and nearly collided with her cart. He was tall, dressed in a black suit, so clean and precise it made the streak of blood at his collar startling. His hair was black, slightly too long, falling over his forehead in a way that should have softened him and did not. His jaw was rigid. His eyes were dark and steady and completely awake in a way that made the hallway seem smaller. One cufflink was missing. There was blood across his knuckles. He caught the tray before the glass water bottle could hit the floor. Imani stared at his hand where it held the silver edge. Strong fingers. A fresh cut across the base of his thumb. No tremor. "You're bleeding," she said. "So are your towels now," he answered. His voice was quiet, too quiet, the kind that made people lean in without meaning to. She glanced past him. The service door behind him swung once, then settled. No one else came out. A black keycard lay half hidden near the wheel of her cart. She bent, picked it up before he could look down, and slid it into her apron pocket on instinct. The man's gaze dropped to her face again. "If you're trying to die dramatically," she said, adjusting the tray he still held, "do it somewhere else. I'm the one who has to explain blood on imported carpet." For the first time, something almost like surprise moved across his face. Not offense, not amusement exactly. Recognition, maybe. As if he had not expected the woman in the maid uniform to sound like that. She pulled a fresh hand towel from the cart, folded it once, and held it toward him. "Press here." He did not move. "You always ignore obvious instructions? You always give them?" "When they're necessary." He took the towel. Up close, she noticed what unsettled her. Not that he was handsome. Men being handsome had never paid her rent. It was the stillness. Most people who carried power around them leaked it everywhere, like spilled perfume. This man held his so close it had edges. "You need a doctor," she said. "I need 5 minutes." "Then take them somewhere less visible." His eyes shifted to the name stitched on her uniform. "Imani." He said it once, not like a flirtation, not like a question, just reading it. Footsteps sounded at the end of the corridor. Staff. Approaching fast. She lowered her voice. "If someone sees you like this, it becomes paperwork for me." The corner of his mouth moved. That was when she said it. Not rude, not kind, just honest. The kind of honesty that most people buried because it cost too much. "Whatever fight you came from," she said, "finish it without making strangers clean up the proof." He looked at her for a long moment. "You always talk to strangers like that?" he asked. "Only the ones who need to hear it," she said. She turned her cart and walked away before the answer could come. In 6 years of handling men with money, men with tempers, and men who confused fear for respect, she had learned one rule that never failed. Leave first. She reached the elevator before she let herself breathe out. When the doors slid shut, she looked down and found the black keycard still in her pocket, warm from her hand. No logo, no number, just a silver line across matte black. The elevator descended, and without any good reason at all, the thing that stayed with her was not the blood or the suit or the silence. It was the way he had said her name. By 10 that night, Malik had called 4 times. By 11, the landlord had taped a red notice to her apartment door. By midnight, Imani was sitting on the edge of her narrow bed in a studio that smelled like fabric softener and cold rain, counting numbers that refused to stretch far enough. Malik's university account, rent, grocery money, bus fare, the tiny amount she had promised to send her aunt in Houston because family need traveled faster than any flight. Her phone lit again. "Malik, you okay? Don't send it if you don't have it. I can talk to the office." She closed her eyes. He was 19 and trying too hard to sound older. Their mother had died when he was 14, and she was 23, and ever since then he had asked for less than he needed because he had watched her carry too much alone. She typed back, "I said I've got it." Sleep. Then she looked at the banking app and hated the lie sitting there like a brick. Morning came gray and sharp. By 8:30, the hotel lobby was full of black cars. Not 1 or 2, 7. Men in dark suits stepped out first, scanning the entrance with the casual focus of people who expected bad things and prepared anyway. Staff lined themselves along the marble like a row of ironed ghosts. Bellboys straightened. Managers bowed. Even Director Choi's spine changed shape. Imani had just finished replacing orchids at the front desk when the revolving door turned and the man from the service corridor walked in. No blood this time, just a black coat over a black suit, silver watch at his wrist, and a silence that moved ahead of him like weather. Every person in the lobby shifted around that silence. People stepped back without being told. The pianist stopped in the middle of a note. A whispered name passed between two receptionists near the concierge desk. Chairman Han. Another whisper, lower. Han Ji-won. One of the doormen bowed so deeply his forehead nearly pointed at the marble. Imani went still. Han Ji-won. The name meant more than a company owner. It moved under headlines and rumors and quiet fear. John Port Holdings. Murong Hotels. Private security firms. 2 hospitals. Real estate so deep in soul that people joked he could close a street by deciding to walk on it. In public, he funded scholarships and orphanages and never smiled for cameras. In private, people used titles for him the way churchgoers used prayer. The ghost of soul. And she had handed him a towel and told him not to bleed on her carpet. He walked through the lobby without looking left or right until his gaze landed on her. Just once. No visible reaction. No hint. Then he kept walking. Choi hurried forward. Chairman Han, we weren't informed you would be visiting this morning. Han did not slow down. You are informed now. His voice crossed the lobby like a blade laid flat on glass. The entire executive staff trailed him toward the private elevators. One assistant nearly tripped over her own heels trying to keep up. A guard moved to hold the doors. Just before they closed, Han looked past the shoulder of the man in front of him and said, "The maid." Choi froze. Imani did not move. Han's gaze stayed on her. "Send her upstairs." The elevator doors closed. Every face in the lobby turned toward her at once. Choi recovered first. "You. With me." She followed him to the executive elevator in silence. Her pulse stayed steady, but anger had already started its slow climb. Not fear. Anger. If he had told her who he was in that corridor, she would still have given him the towel. That wasn't the problem. The problem was the lie by omission. The problem was powerful men loved the luxury of being ordinary only when it entertained them. The presidential suite office was colder than the lobby. Floor-to-ceiling windows held the city behind a veil of rain. Sun Ho, Han's right-hand man, stood near the door with the expression of someone who had forgotten how to blink sometime around adolescence. Han was by the windows, one hand in his pocket. He turned when she entered. Choi smiled too quickly. "You asked for the staff member from yesterday, Chairman. She says there was no disturbance." Imani looked at him. "She says?" she repeated. Choi's jaw flexed. "You may answer when spoken to properly." Han's eyes flicked once to Choi. No more than that. The room cooled another degree. "Leave us," Han said. Choi hesitated. Han did not raise his voice. "I wasn't unclear." Choi left. So did everyone else except Sun Ho, who stayed by the door like a human lock. The moment the office clicked shut, Imani folded her arms. "So," she said. "Chairman Han?" He watched her. "You're angry." "You asked for me up here to discuss my emotional state?" "I asked for you because you picked something up in the corridor last night." She kept her face blank. "What makes you think that?" "Because my attacker lost access to a private service network," he said, "and because you're not careless." There it was again. Not flattery. Observation. More dangerous. "What if I threw it away?" "You didn't." Outside, thunder pressed against the glass. Imani reached into her apron, placed the black keycard on the table between them, and took one step back. "I don't know what it opens," she said, "and I don't want to." He glanced at the card, then at her. "That will be difficult." Something hot flashed through her chest. "Do not do that." "Do what?" "Talk to me like my life is furniture you can rearrange." Sunho's head tilted the smallest amount, like even he had not expected that sentence to survive the air. Han stepped closer to the table, but did not touch the card. "You saw nothing last night?" "I saw a man in an expensive suit making a mess in my hallway." "And before that?" She said nothing. His gaze sharpened. He understood that silence. Men like him probably lived off it. "If Director Choi asks," he said, "you gave the card to me the moment you found it." Her head snapped up. "Why would Director Choi ask?" Han said nothing. That was answer enough. The anger in her changed shape. There was a knock. Then an assistant pushed the door open without waiting, pale and breathless. "Chairman, the board is assembled." Han nodded once. The assistant's eyes flicked to Imani, then away. He slid the keycard into his pocket. "You should go home with security tonight." "No." His expression did not change. "You're not in a position to refuse." "That sounds exactly like something a man like you would say." For one long second, no one moved. Then Han looked at Sunho. "Make sure she gets home safely anyway." Imani took a step toward the door. "I didn't agree to that." "No," he said quietly. "You didn't." She stopped with her hand on the handle and looked back. What exactly did Director Choi do? Han's face gave her nothing. But Sunho answered. He made a very bad decision. She left before the room could close around her. If you're watching this and you can already see where this is going, drop a blue heart in the comments. Because this man is about to make a very big mistake, called feelings. Director Choi found her in the laundry intake room at 2:15. The industrial dryers hummed. Steam blurred the corners of the ceiling. The smell of detergent sat heavy in the air. Dami, the only person in the hotel who called Imani baby and meant it like armor, had just wheeled a cart out when Choi stepped inside and shut the door behind him. Imani kept folding sheets. "You were upstairs a long time," he said. "You keep track of my minutes now?" "I keep track of what matters." She stacked the last towel, squared the edges, and finally looked at him. "Say what you came to say." His smile was gone. "What did he ask you?" "Housekeeping standards," she said. He was deeply invested. Choi took 2 steps closer. "You don't want to be difficult with me." "I'm not being difficult. I'm being tired." That landed. Men like him hated exhaustion because it made them less impressive. He lowered his voice. "There was a card missing. Restricted access. If you found it, give it to me." "Why would I give anything to you?" The back of his jaw jumped. "Because your brother studies on scholarship," he said. "Because international students get nervous when funding disappears. Because rent in this city is high. Because your file is thinner than you think." For half a second, the dryers were the only sound in the room. He knew about Malik. Of course he knew about Malik. Imani set the towel down with care. "You should leave." "Or what?" "Or you'll find out how much I can say with witnesses nearby." His eyes narrowed. Then he smiled again. But this time it was uglier. "You're very brave for someone so temporary." He turned and walked out. The door shut. Imani stood still until the dryers finished their cycle and clicked into silence. Then she reached for her phone with hands that stayed steady because she had trained them to. Not fear. Never first. Always the plan. She texted Malik. "Do not go anywhere alone today." Then Dami came back in with a cart of fresh sheets and one look at her face. What happened? Nothing yet. Dami leaned against the cart, loud mouth finally quiet. That man again? Imani nodded once. Dami swore under her breath. You need to report him. To who? Men who golf with him? Dami had no answer for that. By the end of the shift, a black sedan sat across the street from Imani's apartment building. Same car for 3 nights. Same driver pretending not to watch. The first night, she ignored it. The second night, she memorized the plate. The third night, she crossed the street in the rain, marched up to the tinted window, and knocked. The rear door opened before she could knock again. Han Ji-won sat inside. Of course he did. The leather smelled expensive and clean. Warm air spilled out into the wet night. Get in, he said. She stood in the rain. Absolutely not. You've been followed since Tuesday. So you decided to improve the experience. His mouth almost moved. Get in, Imani. No. His gaze dropped briefly to the red notice taped crookedly beside the apartment entrance, then back to her face. Your landlord talks too much, he said. Ice slid down her spine. You had someone speak to him? I had someone listen to him. That is not better. A bus splashed through a puddle nearby. Neon from the convenience store across the street turned the rain pink for a second. She folded her arms. Are you following me? He did not deny it. I'm making sure the wrong men don't reach you first, he said. That should have sounded threatening. It didn't. That was the problem. Why? Because Choi is sloppy when he panics. That's his problem. You're the edge he cut himself on. The answer sat between them in the rain. Imani looked away first, at the weak yellow light over her building entrance, at the crack in the third stair, at everything ordinary and fragile in the world. What do you want from me? 5 minutes. You said that the first time, and you gave them to me. Against her better judgment, against the rain, against the long fatigue of a life that had taught her powerful men never offered anything for free, she got into the car. The door shut. Silence wrapped around them. Sun-ho drove. No radio. No small talk. Seoul passed in streaks of wet light outside the window. They stopped not at one of Han's towers, but at a community center in Itaewon, where Imani spent Saturday afternoons helping immigrant kids with English homework and math. The building was closed at night. The security guard, apparently already instructed, nodded them inside. The classroom smelled faintly of crayons, old paper, and reheated noodles. Children's drawings covered one wall. Houses. Sons. Stick families holding hands that were too big for their bodies. Imani turned. Why are we here? Han was looking at the drawings. He did not answer at first. For 8 full seconds, the most feared man in Seoul looked 12 years old and lost. When he finally spoke, his voice was lower than before. My sister used to draw houses like that, he said. Not a confession, just a crack in the wall. Imani watched him in the weak classroom light. You had a sister. I had a lot of things. The sentence ended there. She walked to the desk, touched the edge of a workbook she had left there last week, and leaned back against the wood. Choi threatened my brother. I know. Are you going to keep saying things like that and expect me not to ask how you know them? Yes. He said it without humor. That almost made her laugh, which annoyed her on sight. He noticed. What?
You're impossible. So I'm told. She shook her head. The room was quiet except for the hum of an old heater in the corner. Outside, rain ticked lightly against the window. I don't need you, she said. He looked at her for a long moment, the kind of look that measured and calculated and came to a conclusion. No, he agreed quietly. You don't. That's what makes this interesting. Imani exhaled through her nose. I am not a puzzle for you to solve. I know. Then stop appearing in my life like some badly dressed omen. That got it. A real reaction. Brief, but real. The shadow of a smile. My suit is custom. It still doesn't save your timing. He glanced at her hands. Dry knuckles. Tiny cut near her thumb from broken glass 2 days ago. You carry too much alone, he said. No. Her answer came fast. I carry what's mine. A beat passed. Then he said, nobody should have let that become the same thing. The heater rattled once in the corner. Imani looked at him too hard, then away. That sentence was dangerous. Not because it was romantic, because it was accurate. Her phone buzzed. A photo message. She opened it. Her apartment door. Splintered wood. Lock broken. Red paint across the center in ugly, dripping letters. Thief. Under the picture, an unknown number. Return what isn't yours, or your brother pays for your pride. The room narrowed to the phone screen. Han was beside her before she could step back. Not touching, just there. Show me. She held the phone up. His eyes moved once across the screen and changed. No rage. Rage would have been easier. He became quieter, more precise. Sunho. The door opened immediately. Apparently, Sunho had been standing outside the entire time, which should not have surprised her, and did. Han handed him the phone. 2 teams, Han said. 1 to Busan, 1 to her building. Now. Sunho left without a word. Imani stepped away. No. Han turned. You don't get to do that. Do what? Move my life around because you decided it matters today. His jaw tightened slightly. You think this is about today? What else would it be? He did not answer. And because he did not answer, because he held too much back and expected the world to trust the shape of his silence, her anger found teeth again. I'm not going with you, she said. Your door is broken. I can sleep at Dami's. Choi knows that. I'll go to the police. Choi has dinner with 2 of them on Fridays. The words dropped heavy and simple. She hated that he probably wasn't lying. She hated even more that part of her had already guessed. No, she said again, but softer now, not to him, to the shift in the ground under her feet. Han took 1 step closer, not enough to crowd her. Refuse my protection if you want, he said, but understand what you're refusing. Not me. Time. She looked up at him, and in his face there was nothing theatrical, no arrogance, no seduction, just a brutal kind of certainty, the kind built by burying too many people and learning what came before the grave. She said, if I come with you, it doesn't mean I trust you. I know. It doesn't mean I owe you. I know. It doesn't mean you can make decisions for me. That pause again. We'll see, he said. She almost told him to go to hell. Instead, she grabbed her bag. Han Ji-won's penthouse was 47 floors above the Han River and warmer than anywhere Imani had lived in 3 years. That was the first thing she noticed. Not the glass walls, not the art, not the quiet hum of hidden security and money wrapped in architecture. The heat. Someone had turned it up before they arrived. She stood just inside the entrance, damp from rain, overnight bag in one hand, and looked around at the dark wood, soft lamplight, and windows full of soul glittering below like the city had been scattered by hand. I'm in the guest room? She asked. Han took off his coat. Unless you planned to argue for the master bedroom. I plan to sleep and leave in the morning. We'll see. There you go again. He handed her a keycard. Your room. The door locks from inside. The window does not open. That's reassuring in a terrible way. It wasn't meant to reassure you. Of course it wasn't. The guest room overlooked the river. Fresh towels sat folded on the bed. A set of soft clothes waited on a chair, black cotton, new, still carrying the faint, clean smell of fabric and store shelves. Beside them was a small jar of raw shea butter. Imani stared at it. She turned, walked back into the living room, and found him pouring water into 2 glasses. Why is there shea butter in my room? He looked at her. You carry a travel jar in every bag. That is not an answer. It's the answer you're getting. Her throat tightened for one irritating second. He had noticed that. Not her mouth, not her body, not some lazy thing men noticed first when they wanted access. Her habits. The tiny survival rituals nobody paid attention to unless they were watching with care. She took the water from him and said, because if she did not say it, she would have to sit down under the weight of it. That's invasive. Yes, he said. At least you're honest. He drank from his own glass. Usually. She slept badly and deeply at once, waking twice to silence so complete it sounded expensive. At dawn, she found the kitchen lit by the soft blue of morning, and Han standing at the counter in rolled shirt sleeves, making coffee like he had lived alone for years. There was ginger tea already steeping beside a plate of toasted bread and eggs with peppers, exactly the way her mother used to make them on rushed school mornings. Not identical. Nothing could be identical, but close enough to make her stop in the doorway. He glanced over his shoulder. You weren't eating enough, he said. You've known me 4 days. Long enough. She sat slowly. The coffee smelled dark and bitter. The toast was warm. The windows had gone silver with morning. Did you interrogate my brother too? She asked. Or did you learn this by reading my soul from a distance? I ask Dami what you eat when you're worried. Imani looked up. You talked to Dami? She talked at Sunho for 11 minutes. I learned a lot. That image nearly ruined her. She ate despite herself. That was how it started in his world. Not with softness, exactly. With attention. With the terrible intimacy of being seen in practical ways. The days that followed moved strangely. Tension, then quiet. He took calls that emptied rooms. She argued with him in hallways lined with art worth more than her building. He told her nothing fully and watched her like he was memorizing what anger looked like on her face. She learned his schedule without meaning to. The hours he vanished into meetings. The way he rubbed his thumb once over the inside of his wrist when a headache started. The fact that he never sat with his back to a window and always noticed where the exits were. One evening she found him in the study, standing motionless in front of a shelf of poetry books. You read these? She asked. He did not turn around. Some of them. You surprise me. No, I don't. She leaned against the doorframe. Rain tapped softly against the glass. The study smelled like cedar and paper. You know what I expected? She said. Go on. A man with a gun in every drawer and no books without his own face on the cover. That time he turned. And instead? Guns and poetry. He considered that. Better branding. She should not have smiled, but she did. Another night he came home late with blood at his cuff again. Not much. Enough. She was in the kitchen, barefoot, unable to sleep. He paused when he saw her. You're awake. You're bleeding again. It's superficial. That word means nothing from men like you. He looked tired. That was rarer than blood. She fetched the first aid kit before she could talk herself out of it. He sat at the kitchen island because she pointed, and the city glowed beyond the glass while she cleaned a cut at his side in careful, efficient silence. His skin was warm under her fingers. The room was too quiet. Her own breathing sounded louder than it should have. "You stitched your own hand once," he said suddenly. She glanced up. "How do you know that?" "You flex your left ring finger before lifting anything heavy." She tied the bandage too tightly. He did not flinch. "My mother worked herself sick," she said. "Clinic closed before we could get there. I stitched it in the bathroom with a sewing needle and U-tube." His eyes stayed on her face. "That was stupid." "So was getting cut tonight." A beat. Then, softly, in Korean, he said, "Gokjongdwe." She frowned. "What does that mean?" He looked away first. "Nothing." It did not mean nothing. It meant, "I'm worried. And if you are still here, and I know you are, drop a G1 in the comments right now. Because this man just said, Gokjongdwe, and I need you to understand what that means." Subscribe if you haven't. Ring the bell. Do not let this story find you without a notification. The almost kiss happened 2 nights later. Of course it did. It was too quiet not to. The penthouse lights were low. She had fallen asleep on the sofa over a paperwork file Soon-ho had brought her, copies of internal complaints against Choi, pages and pages of women who had quit without explanation, staff schedules altered to isolate certain employees, security footage missing from convenient hours. When she woke, a blanket covered her legs. Han stood near the window with his phone dark in his hand, not speaking, not moving. The city reflected over him like another version of the man. She sat up. The blanket slid. "You don't sleep?" "Enough." "That's not an answer either." "No." She went to stand beside him. Below them, the river was black silk. Traffic moved like threads of light. "My brother okay?" she asked. "Yes." "You said that too fast." "He's angry about security escort. That means he's alive." She huffed a laugh. Han looked down at her then, and the room changed. Not by much. That was the dangerous part. Just enough. The air got tighter, warmer. Her pulse shifted under her skin. He lifted one hand, slow enough for her to stop him. She did not stop him. His fingers touched the scar at her chin. "Who did this?" "Bike accident when I was 10. "You lied." She looked at his wrist, at the old thin line there, nearly hidden under his watch. "So did you." Something moved between them. Recognition, exhaustion, the terrible relief of not having to explain every wound to someone who already understood the language of them. He lowered his hand to the side of her face. Not possession. Not yet. A question. She stayed still. The city outside might as well have disappeared. The last thing she noticed clearly was how careful he was being. This man who could rearrange streets with a phone call was touching her like one wrong move might send her out of reach. A phone rang. Sharp. Merciless. He closed his eyes once. She stepped back first. Of course she did. He answered the call without taking his gaze off her face. "What?" Shunho's voice came through tinny and urgent from the speaker. Han listened for 5 seconds, then said, "I'm coming down." He ended the call. "What happened?" Imani asked. His jaw hardened. Choi moved money through 3 shell accounts tonight. We found the route. And? And the police will somehow lose the paperwork unless I hold someone in place long enough to force their hand. Someone like you. Someone like me. He reached for his jacket. Go to bed, he said. No. His hand paused on the chair. No? If I'm the reason he's moving, I get to know what's happening. You get to stay alive. Her chin lifted. That was not the agreement. He crossed the room. The softness had left him. In its place was something colder, controlled, the man whole cities whispered about. Imani, he said, there are things in motion that do not become safer because you are brave. And there are things that become worse when men decide bravery belongs only to them. Silence. Then he nodded once, as if filing the sentence somewhere important. Tomorrow, he said. There is a gala at the hotel. Choi will be there. I'm not cleared to work. That was when his expression changed by 1 degree too many. What do you mean? She stared at him. What do you mean? What do I mean? My suspension should have been lifted yesterday. Something cold opened under her ribs. He did not answer fast enough. That was all it took. Her voice came out very level. Why wasn't it? Hans said, because I needed Choi to believe you were still vulnerable. The room went soundless. There it was. Plain. Brutal. Too late. You let them keep calling me a thief. For 24 hours. You let them freeze my pay. So he would move. You used me. His eyes held hers. He did not lie. He did not soften it. I used his assumptions. On my back. A muscle moved in his jaw. It was contained. She laughed once. It sounded wrong in the room. Contained? She repeated. My brother was threatened. My door was broken. My name was dragged through a hotel where people already look at women like me and decide exactly what we're worth before we even open our mouths. And you are standing here telling me it was contained? He took 1 step closer. She stepped back. He stopped. She didn't cry. She had learned a long time ago that crying in front of the wrong people was a form of surrender. She kept her face still. She kept her voice level. But her hands, she couldn't stop her hands from shaking just slightly, and he saw it. He saw it, and he said nothing. Because there was nothing to say that would matter yet. Get out of my way, she said. He moved. That hurt worse. She went to the guest room, shut the door, and locked it with a hand that still refused to steady. By morning, she was gone. She did not go back to her apartment. She went to Dami's cousin's place in Mapo, a tiny 4th-floor flat above a fried chicken shop where the air smelled like hot oil and garlic all night. Dami sat her down on a mattress on the floor, wrapped a blanket around her shoulders, and asked only one question. You still mad? Yes. Good. Imani looked up. Good? Dami nodded. Because if you stop being mad too early, you forget what they cost you. That was why Dami was family in every way except blood. By noon, Malik had vanished from his dorm. Not vanished exactly, worse. He had left with a man from hotel security carrying forged authorization papers and telling the university office there had been a family emergency in Seoul. Imani called 3 times before he picked up. Background noise, traffic, a muffled voice. Imani? Where are you? A pause, too long. Then Malik said too carefully, I'm fine. Cold slid into her bones. Put him on. Another pause. A new voice came through. Director Choi. You should answer your calls more quickly. Imani stood so fast the blanket dropped. Dami was already on her feet, reading her face. If you touch him. I haven't, Choi said. But your pride continues to make me creative. What do you want? The card is no longer the point. Chairman Han has already used it. Then why my brother? Because men like Chairman Han only understand leverage when it breathes. Imani gripped the phone harder. Tell me where. Tonight, Mirang Crown, Charity Gala, Service Elevator C, 9:30. Come alone with the file Soon-ho left on the coffee table yesterday. Her stomach dropped. The internal complaint file. He knew about that, too. If you tell Han, Choi went on, your brother leaves this city in pieces, the ocean won't return. The line went dead. For 1 second, Dami and the room and Seoul itself seemed to slide 2 inches sideways. Then Imani moved. No, Dami said immediately. Absolutely not. I have to go. You have to breathe first. Imani already had her shoes on. Dami grabbed her arm. Think. I am thinking. No. You're in that place where your eyes get too quiet and you start acting like survival and sacrifice are cousins. Imani pulled free. If I wait, Malik pays for it. If you go alone, maybe you both pay. The room smelled like frying oil and panic. Imani forced herself still. 1 breath, then another. She thought of the complaint file. She thought of the ballroom screens at the Mirang Crown. She thought of every camera angle in the hotel she knew better than some managers because maids saw the bones of buildings. Service doors, blind spots, maintenance panels, audio closets. Then she looked at Dami. Do you still know Junho in events? Dami blinked. The AV tech with the lazy eye? Yes. What are you planning? Imani's voice turned very calm. The kind of thing men like Choi never imagine women like us can do. At 8:40, Han Ji-won was in the back seat of his car reading a message that made his hands go still. From Dami. She's gone to the gala, alone. Don't ask how I got this number. Fix it. For half a second, he did not move. Then the city outside the tinted windows sharpened to points. Turn around, he said. Soon-ho was already doing it. What did she do? Soon-ho asked. Han looked at the phone once more, then put it away. She made a choice. That should have sounded like respect. Instead, it sounded like fear. He moved fast. He did not pray. He had stopped praying at 15. But he made something like a promise to whatever was listening that if she was breathing when he got there, he would spend the rest of his life making sure she had every reason to keep breathing. Lock down the hotel exits, he said. Quietly, no alarms. Choi runs if he sees uniforms. Soon-ho nodded, already speaking into an earpiece. Han leaned back once, eyes on the rain-streaked city. Imani had left because he had earned that distance. He knew it. There was no use dressing truth in regret after the damage was done. But if Choi laid a hand on her because Han had underestimated the cost of strategy, Seoul itself would not keep him safe. The gala glittered. Of course it did. Gold drapes, crystal chandeliers, women in silk and diamonds, men wearing power like tailored fabric. A string quartet near the staircase, waiters gliding through the crowd with champagne balanced on silver trays. Imani wore a maid's black uniform with a white collar and cuffs, hair pinned neatly back, head lowered just enough to become invisible. People never really saw the women who cleaned up after them. That was their first mistake. Junho from events had let her into the AV room 3 minutes before his shift started. One flash drive. One favor owed from a time she had covered for him after he broke a projector lens and nearly lost his job. "Whatever this is," he whispered, sweat beading at his temple. "I don't know it." "You don't." The file Choi wanted was in her apron pocket. The copy she needed was already loaded into the ballroom presentation system. At 9:10, So Yuna arrived on Han Ji-won's arm. Imani saw them from behind a tray of champagne and understood two things at once.
First, Yuna was beautiful in the polished, pale way magazines knew what to do with. Silver gown, elegant neck, controlled smile. Second, Han looked like he would rather walk through fire than escort her into that room. So, public fiancé. That explained some things and ruined others. Yuna leaned in to say something. Han bent his head to hear. To anyone else, they looked intimate. Imani forced her face blank and kept moving. Then she saw it. Yuna's hand. Shaking. Not much. Enough. And suddenly the picture shifted. Not lovers. Co-conspirators? No. Something sadder. Prisoners in different clothes. At 9:23, Choi sent a message. Rooftop access in 10. Come alone. At 9:24, Malik sent one too. Just 3 words. I'm still here, alive. She closed her eyes once and opened them into steel. The quartet changed songs. Han moved through the room greeting donors, ministers, board members. His public face was flawless, clean, controlled, untouchable. But his gaze kept cutting the crowd, searching for her. Then the title line happened. It happened near the foot of the grand staircase, while a photographer shouted for one more shot and donors clustered close enough to overhear without seeming to. Yuna leaned toward Han, pale under the ballroom lights. I can't stay after the speech, she whispered. My father's men are outside. If Choi sees me with you all night, he'll release the documents. Han's hand tightened around hers just enough to stop her from stepping away. Stay with me tonight, he said, low and firm. Imani set her tray down. She crossed the marble before she could talk herself out of it. She won't, she said. Both of them turned. So did half the room. There were 1,000 ways to die socially in a space like that. A maid interrupting the city's elite in front of cameras was one of them. Imani kept walking until she stood beside them under the light. Han's face gave her nothing for one stunned second. Then everything dangerous in him woke up. Yuna stared. What are you doing? Saving time, Imani said. She looked at Yuna directly. He's right. You can't leave. Choi's watching the doors. But you're not the only woman he can use tonight. Han's voice dropped. Imani. She did not look at him. To Yuna, she said, Your father's debt records are in Choi's hands.
That's what he's using against you, isn't it? The color drained from Yuna's face. Good. Correct. Imani leaned closer and lowered her voice. If you walk now, he still owns you. If I stay, he thinks he owns the ending. Let him. Yuna's throat moved. You don't understand what kind of man. I do, Imani said. That's why I'm still standing here. Han stepped closer. The warmth of his body hit her side. His voice was so quiet it almost disappeared under the strings. You do not decide this alone. She turned then and met his eyes. No, she said. Tonight, we decide it together. Something hit his expression then, hard, visible only if you knew where to look. Yuna looked between them and very slowly pulled her hand from Han's. I'll go to the East Lounge, she said. 10 minutes. That's all I can give you. It's enough, Imani answered. Yuna walked away. The cameras flashed somewhere behind them. Han looked down at Imani in her maid uniform and said, with enough anger to darken the air between them, You should have stayed where it was safe. She lifted her chin. You didn't, she said. So now I'm here. That almost broke him. Instead, it made him sharper. You're not leaving my sight. Then keep up. She turned before he could stop her. She did not head for the rooftop. That was what Choi expected. Instead, she walked straight into the ballroom control aisle, reached behind the velvet curtain, and handed the hidden microphone to Han without slowing. His fingers closed around it. Understanding flashed once in his eyes. Then every screen in the meringue crown lit up. Payroll fraud, security edits, guest blackmail logs, staff complaints buried for years, and finally, live rooftop footage. Choi stood there with Malik beside him and a gun in his shaking hand. The room exploded. Han moved first. Soon-ho and security broke toward the service elevators. But when the rooftop feed switched angles, everyone saw what Choi had not planned for. Imani was already there. She had taken the maintenance stairs. She stood between Choi and Malik, rain soaking her uniform, phone raised. You like leverage? She asked, voice echoing through the ballroom speakers. Smile. Seoul is watching. Choi lunged. Malik drove his elbow back. The gun skidded across wet concrete. Imani kicked it away. By the time Han reached the rooftop, Choi was already on his knees, not beaten by bullets, but by witnesses, by truth, by the one thing men like him never believed a maid could carry into a room and survive. Police came after that, real ones this time. Media, too. Choi was arrested. The hotel board buried him publicly to save itself. Malik was safe. Yuna's father's records were released and cleared. And 3 weeks later, Imani walked back into the meringue crown, not as staff, but as director of guest ethics for the new administration. Her condition, her office, her rules. That night, at Han's penthouse kitchen, with the river dark beyond the glass, he set a cup of ginger tea in front of her and said quietly, "Stay with me tonight." This time, no one interrupted. Imani looked at him, at the man who had once felt like danger wearing a suit, and touched his wrist where the old scar lived. "For tonight," she said. Then, after a pause that changed everything, she smiled. "And maybe for every night you earn after that."